Ваша задница чихнула, и лошади не разговаривают. Нет, 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 и слышать ничего не желаю.
Ладно, хорошо, пусть будет по-твоему. Дорогая, будешь нарушать. На кнопку не нажимать.
This idea, first floated by a Reddit user around 13 years ago, argues that Peter's outlandish adventures
Проклятая матриархиня! Опять забыла пополнить морозильный ящик напитками. Я выскажу и все, что о ней думаю. Ты вышел из полукруга?
Да, не то что эти тупые зажравшиеся шведы. На самом деле, шведы бывают очень разные. А знаете ли вы, что Швеция подарила нам великого изобретателя Альфреда Нобеля?
Мэг, я больше не хочу быть скаутом.
О, боже милостивый, ты видел их вместе, не так ли? А знаешь, ванночка, в которой ты любишь купаться? В ней они тоже этим занимались.
Да ладно тебе, правила созданы для того, чтобы...
Минуточку. Спит, тебе не стоит участвовать в гонке, ха-ха!
Крис, сейчас я встану и выйду из комнаты. И больше на эту тему не разговариваем.
Что мамочка приготовила на десерт?
Желе! Какая экзотика! Я будто попал на борт Куин Элизабет. Ладно, ладно! У вас 3 дня, чтобы заработать нашивку!
Не насекомых. Смотри, Крис, это же целое семейство ос.
Боже, Маргарет, какой недоделанный окорок.
Возможно, я не умею запекать окорок, но в отличие от некоторых, я хотя бы умею вести себя за столом.
Пэтти, тебе известно, что твоя мать шлюха?
Пожалуйста, как там тебя? Боже, я не прошу тебя о многом, сделай так, чтобы мой сын выиграл.
Да ладно! На самом деле не твой отец! Ага!
Если не выиграешь, домой не возвращайся. О, он просто шутит. Ты же знаешь папу. Мы тебя очень любим, несмотря ни на... Разряд. Разряд.
Вы спасли мне жизнь, доктор!
Разряд.
Ударился.
Чтобы я не ударился, это лучшее, что пришло тебе в голову, Мегера, без мозга.
Мою кассету.
Поставь песенку про автобус и убирайся ко всем чертям.
А где Брайан?
Разве ты не едешь?
Нет уж, спасибо, бывал я в Нью-Йорке. Это как Прага, только без...
Черт, Джули, я мать-одиночка, делающая всю чертову работу по чертову дому. И черт, Шнайдер, я еще 2 дня назад просила починить чертову раковину.
А под раковиной я подразумеваю ваш детородный...
3 дня! Это же завтра! Нам нужно торопиться! Кто это дал тебе право учить меня, как воспитывать моего сына?
Не стартовать, пока я не взмахну флажком. Это очень важно. Сейчас я взмахну, чтобы вы увидели, на что это похоже.
Лись, пожалуйста, спроси у кого-нибудь дорогу.
Я починю вашу раковину, мисс Романа. И под починить раковину я подразумеваю, что за...
Бегущий медведь. Поворот налево. Что? Вот, сволочи! Не беспокойся, Крис, я верну тебя назад.
Но пап все должен участвовать, ха-ха!
Верить не могу. Мы действительно едем в Нью-Йорк.
Папа, может, не стоит?
Еще как стоит! Никто не смеет выкидывать моего сынка из скаутов.
После многолетних исследований я наконец обнаружил секрет собачьего долголетия. И секрет
Мы прерываем, было. О, господи, Брайан! У меня в ложке послание. Тут сказано...
Питер — это колечки.
Какого черта ты себе позволяешь?
Пристегиваю тебя, милый, чтобы ты не...
Смотрите, лук-бабочка! Это не является азартными играми как таковыми. Это средство восстановления утраченной культуры после того, как вы изнасиловали нашу землю и осквернили наших женщин.
Ну, если вы не потратите все на огненную воду...
Тупая баба!
Герпес дважды и трипер.
Питер, Крис...
Забавно, мать. Еще утром ты говорила, что они ленивы, как грязные мексиканцы. Ха-ха, шучу. Мексиканцы чистоплотные работящие люди с богатым культурным наследием.
According to this theory, Stewie actually died in infancy, and everything we witness is a grief-fueled hallucination of Brian's, an imagining of what the baby might have grown into. The idea suggests that Brian, the most intellectual member of the family, projected his own sophistication onto the memory of baby Stewie after a tragic early death. That would explain why Stewie talks with Brian's vocabulary and shares his cynical outlook, while the rest of the family barely registers his advanced behavior. In Brian's mind, Stewie became the brilliant companion he never had in real life. Chitty, chitty death. Bang offers the first big clue when we see Stewie's birth flashback, but notice how traumatic Peter finds the delivery. When the doctor says, "One more push," and Lois and Peter witness the birth, Peter is horrified by what he sees, screaming, "Oh God." The episode presents this as Peter being squeamish. But what if something actually went wrong during the delivery? The fact that Peter says he'll never forget the day Stewie was born takes on a sinister edge when you consider that most parents remember a birth as joyful, not traumatic. The most damning evidence comes from Stewie's own preoccupation with death across both episodes. In his diary entries, he describes his time in the womb as being imprisoned in that uterine gulag, and recalls rushing toward freedom only to be ambushed by a mysterious man in white. This is not typical baby talk. It is the language of someone processing trauma and mortality. When he mentions the man in white, the doctor trying to put me back in the womb, he is essentially describing death as a return to non-existence. What really sells the theory is how Brian interacts with Stewie compared to everyone else. While Lois changes diapers and treats him like a normal baby, Brian engages with Stewie's intricate thoughts and schemes. In Death is a Bitch, when Peter confronts his own mortality during the breast lump scare, Stewie becomes even more fixated on death and violence. The timing is no accident. Brian's imaginary Stewie grows more morbid as death enters the household. The family's selective deafness to Stewie's advanced speech suddenly makes sense if most of his dialogue exists only in Brian's mind. Lois responds to basic baby needs, while Brian experiences full conversations with this impossibly articulate infant. The show never explains why a baby can discuss quantum physics, yet struggles with toilet training, unless that baby exists only in the imagination of a grieving intellectual dog. This theory turns Family Guy's strangest character into its most tragic, suggesting that Brian's entire relationship with Stewie is elaborate wish fulfillment for the intellectual companion he lost before they ever really met. This next theory explores the idea that Brian is a genius, but not the ordinary kind, rather the disturbed kind of genius. Brian is the real genius. Seasons 8 and 1. When Family Guy suggested Brian's clever conversations might just be happening inside his own mind, it opened a door. Brian Griffin thinks he is the smart one in the family. But what if his witty exchanges with baby Stewie are really just Brian talking to himself? Consider the possibility that Stewie is a completely normal baby, and Brian imagines him as brilliant because Brian is starved for someone intelligent to talk to. This theory started appearing on Family Guy fan forums in the early 2010s after the episode Brian and Stewie aired. Fans noticed that their conversations felt too mature, even for the show's strange world, and some viewers began to wonder whether these talks were real or purely inside Brian's head. The idea holds that Brian feels trapped in his dull suburban life with a family that does not understand him, so his mind manufactures an imaginary genius baby to give him the deep conversations he craves. Every debate about science, philosophy, or culture exists only in Brian's imagination, while he watches a regular baby make ordinary baby noises. The family sees typical infant behavior, but Brian experiences complex talks that happen to match his own thoughts and interests. Brian and Stewie provides the strongest support for this theory. When the two get trapped alone in a bank vault with no family around, their relationship turns intensely psychological. Brian admits he keeps alcohol in his safe deposit box, exposing his personal problems, while Stewie's manipulation feels too advanced, even for this show. The whole episode plays more like Brian having an internal crisis than a genuine conversation with a baby. The most important moment arrives when Stewie forces Brian to clean his dirty diaper, then cruelly says he got Brian to eat his poop just to see if he could. This is not how babies think. It sounds like the kind of harsh self-punishment Brian might inflict on himself. The entire humiliating experience reads like Brian's subconscious mind punishing him for his failures and his fake sophistication. When Stewie says, "I used you, man," and calls Brian the best of a bad situation, these sound exactly like Brian's own negative thoughts about himself. The alcohol sharing scene becomes even more disturbing under this reading. Brian gives liquor to what he believes is a willing friend, but in reality, he may be endangering a real infant. His comment that this is the closest he has ever felt to Stewie reveals his desperate hunger for real connection, even one his own mind manufactured. The ear-piercing incident shows Brian actually hurting Stewie while believing they are bonding as friends. Most telling of all is how perfectly their conversations line up with Brian's personality and interests. Stewie discusses expensive fashion, makes cultural references, and uses the exact same pretentious vocabulary Brian uses. When Stewie mentions returning a Tom Brown sweater or talks about a bounty hunter, these feel like Brian's own cultural interests projected onto a baby. Even Stewie's confession about voting for McCain matches Brian's tangled political views perfectly. The security camera reveal at the episode's end suggests the outside world would see only Brian alone with a normal baby, making strange gestures and talking to himself. This theory transforms what looks like an odd friendship into a portrait of intellectual loneliness so severe that Brian invents an entire personality to avoid facing his own average life and isolation. This next theory is hard to believe even for me. Could the Griffins actually be in hell? The Griffin family endures constant chaos, multiple deaths, and impossible comebacks throughout the series, which leads some fans to conclude they are actually dead and trapped in hell. The theory holds that their endless cycle of violence, humiliation, and strange experiences represents eternal punishment rather than ordinary suburban life. It first surfaced in online Family Guy communities around 2005 and 2006, and gained strength after episodes featuring death as a recurring character. Fans notice that the family's suffering never leads to lasting results or genuine growth, which fits the classic notion of hell as repetitive, meaningless torture. The theory spread across Reddit and fan forums, where viewers pointed out that death appears unusually often in the Griffins' lives. The evidence becomes clear when you examine how death speaks to the Griffin family compared to everyone else. In Death Lives, Peter has a near-death experience where death displays detailed knowledge of Peter's relationship with Lois. Death shows Peter memories of their romance, but these flashbacks feel more like mental torture than helpful guidance. Death forces Peter to relive his past happiness while knowing about his present marital problems, creating the perfect emotional punishment. Most telling is Death's casual, almost bored attitude toward Peter's situation. When Peter asks about his appointment, Death treats it like routine paperwork rather than a life or death emergency. Death even complains about being late for lunch with his mother, saying, "Sorry, Ma," when she scolds him for being late. This suggests that managing the Griffins is just another tedious task in his supernatural job, an indifference that makes sense if Peter and his family are permanent residents of hell that Death merely visits from time to time. The time travel sequence in Meet the Quagmires supplies the strongest evidence for this theory. When Peter asks Death to let him go back in time and be 18 again, Death first refuses, then easily agrees, saying, "What the hell, let's go." This suggests Death has unlimited power over Peter's existence and can reshape his reality at will. The fact that Peter can change his past yet still ends up in the same miserable situation shows he is caught in a predetermined loop. During his return to 1984, Peter meets Molly Ringwald and lives the wild youth he never had. But when Death says his time is up and forces him back to his regular life, it mirrors the temporary breaks hell might offer before returning souls to their eternal punishment. Peter's brief happiness only sharpens the pain of his return to suburban misery, which serves hell's purpose perfectly. Most damning is how Death treats these supernatural interventions as entirely routine. He carries Peter through time travel, near-death experiences, and reality changes without any surprise or effort. Death even helps Peter pick up women and attend supernatural appointments, suggesting that managing Peter's existence is his full-time job rather than an occasional divine intervention. The theory explains why the Griffin family never learns from their experiences or grows as people. In traditional hell mythology, the punishment continues forever, without redemption or progress. Peter repeatedly makes the same mistakes. Lois never permanently leaves him, and their children remain stuck in their broken roles. Their suffering serves no purpose except the suffering itself, which lines up precisely with theological descriptions of hell as punishment without hope of improvement. If you're enjoying this series so far, don't forget to subscribe. The next theory won't surprise you one bit. Peter Griffin displays such extreme stupidity throughout the series that many fans believe he suffers from serious brain damage rather than natural low intelligence. His dangerous lifestyle, repeated head injuries, and total inability to learn from mistakes all point to permanent neurological damage that could explain his increasingly bizarre behavior. This theory originated in Family Guy fan communities around 2006 and 2007, particularly after Petarded aired and showed Peter taking an IQ test. It gained traction on forums when fans noticed that Peter's stupidity seemed to worsen over time, suggesting progressive brain damage rather than consistent low intelligence. Medical professionals and psychology students in online discussions pointed out that Peter's symptoms match those of traumatic brain injury patients. The evidence becomes clear in Petarded when Peter takes an official intelligence test and discovers he is mentally disabled. However, the episode treats this as a recent discovery rather than a lifelong condition. When Peter tells his high school friend Sally that she might want to get herself tested, it suggests he believes his condition developed after their relationship, pointing to acquired brain damage rather than a developmental disability. Most telling is Peter's behavior throughout the episode. After learning his test results, he laments that his whole world has changed. The theory also accounts for Peter's dangerous lifestyle choices that would cause repeated head trauma. In The Tan Aquatic with Steve Zissou, Peter shows reckless disregard for safety on the golf course, exposing baby Stewie to extreme heat while making terrible decisions. His friend Joe warns him about bringing a baby to the golf course, but Peter cannot process this simple safety concern. This pattern of dangerous choices would naturally lead to accidents and head injuries over time. Peter's inability to learn from experience offers strong evidence for brain damage. People with low intelligence can still absorb basic lessons, but Peter repeats the same mistakes endlessly without any improvement. When he crashes into other golfers or causes accidents, he shows no understanding of consequences. Brain injury patients often lose the ability to connect actions with results, which matches Peter's behavior exactly. The restaurant scene in Petarded shows classic symptoms of cognitive impairment. Peter cannot understand that soup requires careful eating, and when he falls into the bowl, he panics and cannot problem-solve his way out. His comment that these water wings didn't help at all reflects the kind of literal thinking and poor reasoning that brain injury causes. A normal person would understand that water wings are for swimming, not eating soup. Most damning is how other characters treat Peter's condition as something that developed over time rather than a lifelong trait. Lois switches his Trivial Pursuit questions to preschool level just to let him have his moment, suggesting his intelligence recently dropped to a point where normal questions became impossible. This pattern fits acquired brain damage rather than a developmental disability. The theory transforms Peter from a cartoon character into a tragic figure whose family enables his untreated medical condition instead of getting him proper neurological care. Every member of the Griffin family has their quirks, but Lois does not add up right away. What if she's immortal? Lois is immortal, seasons 4 and 6. When Family Guy showed Lois might be unkillable, it raised eyebrows. Lois Griffin has survived gunshots, explosions, drowning, and countless violent situations throughout the series with minimal lasting damage. This theory suggests that Lois possesses some form of immortality or supernatural resilience that lets her cheat death again and again, making her something more than human. It developed in Family Guy fan communities around 2008 and 2009, particularly after Lois Kills Stewie showed her surviving what should have been fatal injuries. Fans began cataloging Lois's many brushes with death and noticed a pattern of impossible survival. The theory gained support when viewers realized that while other characters suffer lasting consequences from violence, Lois always recovers completely. Patriot Games provides early evidence when Peter becomes a professional football player and his family faces constant danger. Throughout the episode, Lois endures multiple violent situations but emerges unharmed each time. When the Patriots players chase the family through London, Lois survives crashes and physical confrontations that would seriously injure normal people. Her ability to keep running and fighting suggests durability beyond human limits. The shower scene, where Tom Brady accidentally sees the family in their bathroom, shows Lois handling the awkward moment with unusual calm. She behaves almost as though she has lived through similar strange events many times before. Her lack of surprise at bizarre circumstances hints that she may have experienced countless unusual situations over a far longer span than her apparent age suggests. Lois Kills Stewie offers the strongest evidence for immortality. Lois survives being shot point blank on the deck of the cruise ship by Stewie, which would typically be instantly fatal. She explains that a merman treated her wounds and carried her to safety, but this explanation seems designed to cover up her supernatural healing abilities. Recovering from a point-blank gunshot wound while stranded at sea stretches believability even by Family Guy standards. Her story about developing amnesia and working at a fat camp raises even more questions. Lois claims she spent months in North Carolina with no memory, yet she looks exactly the same when she returns and shows no signs of trauma. Even in a cartoon world where talking dogs exist, complete recovery from severe amnesia without any lasting effects seems suspicious. The white supremacist encounter reveals another curious detail. When Lois says it is remarks like that that started the Holocaust and that none of them want it to happen again, she speaks with unusual authority. Her phrasing sounds more like someone who personally witnessed historical events than someone recalling textbook knowledge, suggesting she may have been around far longer than her apparent age indicates. The way Lois recovers her memories after a blow to the head also stands out. While Family Guy often ignores real-world logic, Lois's instant and complete memory recovery feels convenient even by cartoon standards. Her consciousness seems to operate differently from other characters, possibly indicating an immortal being whose memories occasionally get temporarily suppressed but can never be permanently destroyed. What's the deal with Stewie's sexuality? You might want to sit down for this. Stewie is gay, but denies it. Seasons 5 and 16. When Family Guy dropped hints about Stewie's hidden sexuality, it started a conversation. Stewie Griffin makes countless jokes about gay culture, shows unusual interest in male relationships, and displays stereotypically gay mannerisms throughout the series. This theory suggests that Stewie is gay, but stuck in denial about his orientation, with the writers dropping increasingly obvious hints about his true self. The theory developed early in Family Guy's run when fans noticed Stewie's behavior patterns and cultural references, and it gained momentum on fan forums where viewers cataloged his gay-coded dialogue and mannerisms. Series creator Seth MacFarlane has made ambiguous statements about Stewie's sexuality in interviews, neither confirming nor denying the theory. Chick Cancer provides strong evidence through Stewie's relationship with Olivia Fuller. When they reconnect, Stewie calls her fantastic and says she's a woman now, so sophisticated, so grown up. But his dating behavior feels performative rather than natural. When Brian tells him women respond when you treat them like crap, Stewie adopts the approach mechanically, as if following a script, instead of expressing genuine romantic feeling. His insults toward Olivia work because he is mimicking behavior rather than feeling authentic attraction. When he compares her to Ray Liotta and says her skin has the texture of a decorative autumn squash, it succeeds, but it feels calculated rather than passionate. Most telling is the episode's ending. After catching Olivia with Victor, Stewie quickly pivots to complaining about women, asking why you can't just hang out with guys and live with someone of your own sex. When Brian responds that they do, and that it's called being gay, Stewie immediately says, "Oh, that's what gay is. Oh yeah, I could totally get into that." This suggests recognition rather than discovery. Send in Stewie please showcases Stewie's sophisticated cultural knowledge during therapy. His detailed opinions about the Real Housewives of New York City and his specific hatred for Bethany Frankel align with stereotypical gay male interests rather than typical infant preferences. He says she looks like a wooden doll you'd find in an Eastern European toy shop, displaying the sharp social awareness often associated with gay-coded characters. The therapy setting lets Stewie speak freely, revealing personality traits that consistently line up with gay cultural markers. His analytical nature and verbal sophistication during the session feel more authentic than his forced heterosexual relationships. The theory explains why Stewie's romantic relationships with female characters always feel awkward or end badly, while his closest emotional bonds remain with Brian and other male characters. Speaking of relationships, we know Quagmire to be a total pervert and an offender. But could he be a serial killer? When Family Guy hinted that Glenn's crimes go beyond harassment, it got dark. Glenn Quagmire displays predatory behavior, keeps suspicious secrets, and shows a complete lack of empathy throughout the series. This theory examines the possibility that his criminal activity extends far beyond sexual misconduct into actual murder, making him a functioning serial killer hiding in plain sight. It emerged in Family Guy fan communities around 2011 and 2012, when episodes revealed more disturbing details about Quagmire's psychology and behavior. When his mother Crystal arrives at court carrying 3 handguns that the metal detectors missed, Quagmire displays no surprise at her weapon smuggling abilities. His casual acceptance of violence and illegal activity suggests familiarity with criminal planning and execution. Later, when Crystal admits to sexually manipulating the judge twice to secure Quagmire's freedom, he immediately accepts this corruption without moral objection. The dining hall scene in The Giggity Wife shows Quagmire's comfort with identity theft and infiltration. He easily uses stolen identification to access restricted areas, demonstrating skills that would serve a serial killer well. His ability to blend into different environments while maintaining his predatory nature mirrors classic serial killer behavior. Most revealing is Quagmire's emotional detachment when facing prison. Instead of fear or remorse, he worries about practical concerns like his antique watch and cat care. This cold calculation matches the psychological profile of someone who has mentally prepared for imprisonment before, suggesting previous serious crimes that somehow avoided prosecution. Don't forget to subscribe if you're enjoying this series, but have you ever wondered what the hell the chicken fights are all about? The next theory tries to make sense of it all. The epic battles between Peter Griffin and Ernie the Giant Chicken span multiple episodes with escalating violence and destruction. What if these fights aren't just random comedy, but represent Peter's ongoing psychological struggle with adult responsibilities and his inability to escape the consequences of his actions? This theory emerged in Family Guy fan communities around 2005 and 2006, when viewers noticed the chicken fights followed a specific pattern that mirrored Peter's life problems. It gained support when fans observed that the fights always begin with mundane triggers, but escalate into citywide destruction, much like how Peter's small mistakes snowball into major family crises. Da Boom introduces the chicken during the Y2K apocalypse when Peter encounters him at a gas station. The chicken hands Peter an expired coupon, sparking their first massive fight. This seemingly trivial trigger reveals deeper meaning. The expired coupon represents Peter's constant disappointment when reality fails to meet his expectations. When Peter screams and attacks violently, he is really lashing out at his own frustration with a world that refuses to accommodate his childish demands. During their apocalyptic battle, Peter and the chicken level most of Quahog, while the Griffin family struggles to survive in their basement bunker. This destruction parallels how Peter's immaturity regularly wrecks his family's stability. The chicken becomes a physical embodiment of every adult responsibility Peter tries to dodge: bills, consequences, planning ahead, accepting disappointment. Blind ambition revisits Peter's memory of their gas station encounter, but now the chicken appears more menacing and deliberate. When Peter recalls that a nice chicken outside gave him the coupon, followed by the store clerk's rejection, the chicken transforms from helpful to hostile in Peter's mind. This shift reflects how Peter reframes his failures as external persecution rather than accepting personal responsibility. The fight itself grows increasingly surreal and violent, with both combatants surviving impossible injuries while continuing their battle across multiple locations. Peter throws the chicken through building walls. They crash through moving vehicles. Both endure massive trauma without stopping. This supernatural resilience suggests the fight exists more in Peter's psychological landscape than in physical reality. Most revealing is how these fights interrupt Peter's normal life at crucial moments. The chicken always appears when Peter faces adult challenges: the Y2K crisis, his blindness recovery, family obligations. The battles force Peter to abandon whatever responsible action he was supposed to take, giving him an excuse to avoid growing up while feeling heroic about fighting a threat. The endless nature of their conflict supports the metaphor. Unlike typical cartoon violence that resets each episode, the chicken remembers their previous encounters and harbors genuine grudges. This persistent antagonist represents how Peter's avoided responsibilities accumulate over time, growing larger and more destructive with each encounter until they threaten everything he values. Brian is not a normal dog. This is no surprise. But is he in love with Lois? Brian Griffin repeatedly confesses romantic feelings for Lois throughout the series, creating one of the show's most persistent emotional undercurrents. This theory suggests that Brian's love for Lois drives much of his behavior, his personal struggles, and his relationship failures, making their connection the true emotional center of the Griffin household. It emerged early in Family Guy's run, when fans noticed Brian's unusual devotion to Lois compared to other family members, and gained support when viewers observed that Brian's depression, drinking, and failed relationships often coincide with moments when Lois shows attention to Peter or other men. Brian in Love establishes the foundation when Brian develops bladder control problems that his therapist, Dr. Kaplan, links to psychological issues. When Brian finally admits, "I love Lois," the episode treats this as a major revelation rather than casual affection. His confession comes after extended therapy sessions, where he struggles to identify the source of his distress, suggesting these feelings run deeper than simple attraction. The episode shows Brian's physical symptoms, flaring specifically around intimate moments between Peter and Lois. When Peter plays their bedroom game, spraying water while saying, "Take that," Brian immediately has an accident. This direct link between witnessing their intimacy and his loss of control reveals how deeply their relationship affects his psychological state. Most telling is Brian's conversation with Dr. Kaplan, where he insists he loves Lois but is not in love with her, before immediately contradicting himself. When the therapist asks who he is trying to convince, him or himself, it highlights Brian's denial about the depth of his feelings. His final scene with Lois confirms the romantic nature when he directly references being in love with her and her rejecting him. Play it again, Brian shows the evolution of these feelings into genuine romantic pursuit. During their Martha's Vineyard trip, Brian reads his award-winning essay about Lois, describing her as providing strength, life, laughter, and light, and to him, also sorrow. This poetic language reveals sophisticated romantic feeling rather than simple infatuation. The vacation setting lets Brian act on his feelings when Peter repeatedly abandons Lois for drinking and socializing. Brian steps into the role of attentive companion, sharing intimate dinners and meaningful conversations. When he tells Lois she means a lot to him and describes how her absence makes him go berserk, these sound like genuine love confessions rather than friendship. Their physical moment unfolds naturally out of this emotional intimacy. Brian's advance isn't sudden or predatory, but emerges from deep conversation and champagne-fueled honesty. When Lois admits it's not like she hasn't thought about it and describes how their hypothetical relationship would feel like doing it with a stuffed animal, she reveals reciprocal romantic curiosity. The theory explains Brian's perpetual dissatisfaction with other relationships and his tendency towards self-destructive behavior whenever Lois is happy with Peter. Anyway, we know the family is just a cartoon, but are they inside a simulation within the cartoon universe? The next theory investigates this idea. The Griffin family experiences impossible physics, dimension-hopping adventures, and reality-bending cutaway gags that suggest they exist within a computer simulation rather than normal reality. This theory proposes that their world runs on programmed rules that account for the show's bizarre inconsistencies and supernatural elements. It emerged in Family Guy communities around 2009 and 2010, when fans noticed the show's increasing reliance on sci-fi elements and reality manipulation. It gained support when viewers observed that the family's adventures often involve technology that shouldn't exist in their supposedly normal suburban setting. Road to the Multiverse provides the strongest evidence when Stewie casually reveals he has built a functioning multiverse travel device. He explains to Brian that an infinite number of universes coexist with ours on parallel dimensional planes, and demonstrates the technology like it's a simple gadget. For a baby to create interdimensional travel suggests their reality operates on different physical laws than the real world. During their journey, Stewie and Brian encounter universes with varying levels of detail and complexity. The low-resolution, blocky universe, where everyone speaks in simple phrases like, "Lois, where is my supper?" resembles early computer graphics. When Stewie calls it weird and blocky, it suggests they are seeing the underlying programming structure of their simulation. Most revealing is their visit to the Robot Chicken universe, where they exist for exactly 30 seconds. When Brian comments on how it feels to be on a major network for 30 seconds, it breaks the fourth wall in a way that suggests awareness of their artificial nature. The brief appearance feels like a programmed cameo rather than genuine dimensional travel. Viewer mail shows the family's reality being manipulated by external forces when the genie grants Peter 3 wishes. Peter's wish for theme music that follows him everywhere creates a persistent audio overlay he can't turn off, suggesting their environment has programmable parameters that outside controllers can adjust. When Peter wishes away his bones and becomes a formless mass, his body defies basic biology while retaining consciousness. Lois treats this impossible transformation as merely inconvenient, requiring 12 baths a day rather than immediate medical attention. Their casual acceptance of reality-breaking changes indicates they are accustomed to living within flexible programming rules. The cutaway gags throughout both episodes function like data retrieval from a vast memory bank. When Peter references obscure scenarios or historical events, They appear instantly with perfect detail, suggesting access to a programmed database rather than actual memories. The seamless transitions between reality and flashbacks indicate their consciousness can be temporarily redirected to different simulation modules. The theory explains why the Griffin family never ages, rarely faces lasting consequences, and can survive impossible situations. They are protected by simulation parameters designed to maintain story continuity. Some fans believe Joe could be faking his paralysis. The next theory explores the reasoning behind this idea. Joe Swanson displays remarkable upper body strength, tactical combat skills, and suspicious knowledge about his supposed injury throughout the series. This fringe theory suggests Joe never actually lost the ability to walk, but maintains his paralysis charade to gain sympathy, avoid dangerous police duties, and manipulate those around him. It emerged in Family Guy communities around 2008 and 2009, when fans noticed inconsistencies in Joe's physical capabilities and his backstory about becoming paralyzed. While most viewers accept his disability as genuine, some fans began questioning whether his paralysis serves as convenient cover for darker motivations. Believe it or not, Joe's walking on air reveals major inconsistencies. When Joe receives experimental leg transplant surgery, his immediate mastery of complex physical activities like mountain biking and synchronized dancing suggests someone who never truly lost muscle memory or neural pathways. When Joe tells his new athletic friends that he realized over the last few days the only reason he hung out with them is that he was crippled and they were lazy, this confession hints at calculating manipulation rather than genuine friendship. Most suspicious is Joe's complete personality transformation once he can walk. He abandons Bonnie without remorse, telling her he has outgrown her and needs to spread his legs and fly. This cold dismissal suggests someone who used his disability as emotional leverage rather than experiencing genuine limitations. His willingness to abandon his child shows a sociopathic disregard that contradicts his heroic police officer image. Joe's revenge provides the strongest evidence when Joe recounts how Bobby Briggs supposedly paralyzed him. His story changes from the earlier version about falling off a roof during a fight with the Grinch to an undercover operation gone wrong. This inconsistency suggests manufactured backstories to explain his condition. When Joe describes tracking Briggs for 6 months while gathering evidence, his detailed planning reveals sophisticated investigative skills that seem incompatible with the reckless officer who would get shot due to poor procedure. During his confrontation with Briggs, Joe displays combat abilities that surpass what most paralyzed individuals could achieve through upper body training alone. His precise tactical movements and weapons handling suggest full body coordination. When Briggs recognizes him and asks if he is wearing a wire, it implies Joe's cover was blown through his own suspicious behavior rather than bad luck. The revenge plot itself reveals Joe's capacity for elaborate deception and long-term planning. His ability to track down Briggs and orchestrate their final confrontation demonstrates investigative skills that would be difficult to maintain while genuinely disabled. The fact that he kept his vendetta secret from his closest friends for years shows comfort with sustained deception. Most telling is how Joe manipulates others' emotions around his disability. He frequently uses his wheelchair to gain sympathy, avoid responsibilities, or deflect criticism. When other characters question his actions, he can always invoke his paralysis to end discussions and maintain victim status. If you're enjoying this series, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Meg Griffin endures constant emotional abuse from her family throughout the series, leading some fans to theorize that she will eventually snap and take lethal revenge on those who tormented her. Her brief transformations into a violent person suggest she possesses the capacity for extreme violence when pushed beyond her limits. This theory emerged in Family Guy communities around 2010 and 2011, when episodes began showing Meg's darker potential more explicitly. While most fans view her as a harmless victim, some observers noted that her psychological profile matches individuals who commit family annihilator crimes after years of accumulated resentment. Dial Meg for Murder demonstrates Meg's capacity for violence when she returns from prison completely transformed. After cracking 3 kids' skulls open at school and threatening her family with phrases like, "You're all my bitches now," Meg shows how quickly she can shift from victim to aggressor. When she forces Peter to punch himself in the face repeatedly, it reveals her understanding of psychological manipulation and power dynamics. Her armed robbery attempt shows escalation to serious felonies without hesitation. When Brian tries reasoning with her, Meg responds that she doesn't care about Luke, doesn't need him, doesn't need anyone. This complete emotional detachment suggests someone who has given up on human connection entirely. Her willingness to point a gun at a store clerk demonstrates comfort with potentially lethal violence. Most chilling is Meg's statement asking what she cares if she goes back to prison, since nobody cares about her anyway. This fatalistic attitude often precedes mass violence events, where perpetrators decide they have nothing left to lose. Only Brian's magazine article about her positive qualities pulls her back from the edge, but this intervention might not always be available. Seahorse Seashell Party reveals even deeper psychological damage during the family's drug-induced breakdown. While the episode shows the family engaging in inappropriate behavior during the hurricane, Meg's moments of clarity become more significant when viewed through this theory's lens. The episode demonstrates how easily the Griffin family dynamic could spiral into genuine violence once their normal inhibitions are removed. The pattern shows Meg repeatedly reaching breaking points where she briefly becomes the aggressor before external forces or guilt pull her back. However, each incident seems to push her further toward permanent psychological change. Her prison experience taught her that violence can be an effective tool for gaining respect and control. Brian's magazine article describing her as far sweeter and kinder than that ironically highlights how much abuse Meg absorbs before retaliating. The theory suggests that her kindness has limits, and once those limits are permanently crossed, her response could be catastrophic for the entire family. This next theory will make you scratch your head, then say, Chris Griffin consistently appears as the family's most clueless member. Yet, he occasionally displays remarkable insight and intelligence that suggests his bumbling exterior might be a deliberate facade. So what if Chris is secretly brilliant, but chooses to hide his intelligence to avoid expectations and responsibility? This theory emerged in Family Guy communities around 2008 and 2009, when fans noticed Chris's inconsistent intellectual abilities across episodes. While most viewers accept his stupidity as genuine, some observers began cataloging moments where Chris demonstrates sophisticated understanding that contradicts his established character. Long John Peter reveals Chris's capacity for complex social navigation when he successfully pursues Anna, the veterinary assistant. Despite his nervous confession about getting worked up like a kid watching a toy commercial, Chris demonstrates genuine emotional intelligence when discussing his feelings. His admission that he thought she was the most beautiful girl, and now all he wants to do is show her his innermost self, shows psychological sophistication beyond his usual vocabulary. Most telling is Chris's ability to recognize when Peter's advice backfires. When Quagmire suggests treating Anna like crap, Chris initially follows this guidance, but quickly abandons it when he sees the negative results. His decision to apologize and explain his behavior shows strategic thinking and emotional maturity. When he tells Anna he was just really nervous because he's never had a girlfriend before, this honest vulnerability demonstrates calculated authenticity rather than accidental insight. Steroids provides stronger evidence when Chris faces bullying at school. His response to Connie D'Amico's elaborate insults shows surprising emotional resilience. While other students would be devastated by her itemized insults about his appearance and interests, Chris processes the criticism without breaking down. His ability to keep functioning normally after being called names suggests either unusual emotional intelligence or complete detachment from others' opinions. During the barbecue scene, Chris makes an observational joke about being beaten up by a baby girl, noting that what was weird was that she was crying, but the way she was standing over him made it look like he was crying. This meta-commentary on visual perspective demonstrates analytical thinking about perception and reality that seems beyond his supposed intellectual capacity. The theory explains several patterns in Chris's behavior. He often asks seemingly innocent questions that reveal deeper truths about family dynamics. His apparent confusion frequently forces other characters to explain their motivations, suggesting he uses fake naivety as an information-gathering technique. When dealing with romantic situations, Chris shows surprising emotional intelligence despite claiming inexperience. His physical clumsiness and academic struggles could be performance art designed to lower expectations. By keeping his reputation as the family idiot, Chris avoids the pressure Peter faces as the supposed provider, or the criticism Meg endures as the scapegoat. His stupidity serves as protective camouflage in a family where intelligence often leads to responsibility or persecution. The theory suggests Chris has watched how the family treats Brian's intellectualism with suspicion and Stewie's genius with fear, leading him to conclude that appearing stupid offers the safest path through family life. What if the Griffins are in witness protection? That will make sense in a second. Peter Griffin's ability to cause international incidents without facing serious consequences suggests his family operates under federal protection rather than normal legal jurisdiction. Combined with their unexplained wealth and suspicious neighbors, the evidence points toward a witness protection program carefully disguised as suburban normalcy. Peter's property mysteriously doesn't exist on government maps. The mayor's confusion about this bureaucratic impossibility, noting that Peter's property doesn't seem to be on the map and that he's not even part of these United States, indicates deliberate concealment rather than clerical oversight. When Peter declares independence and creates Pretoria, the swift government response suggests federal agencies were already monitoring his family's activities. Peter's "Can't Touch Me" musical number demonstrates supernatural legal immunity as he commits crimes in broad daylight without arrest. Local police simply watch him vandalize property and jaywalk while singing about diplomatic protection. This scene makes sense if standing federal orders prohibit local law enforcement from interfering with Griffin family activities. The international crisis Peter creates by hosting dictators like Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi should trigger serious homeland security responses. Instead, the situation resolves through simple negotiation, with Peter keeping his Big Rudy back-scratching arrangement as his primary concern. This anticlimactic resolution suggests government handlers who prioritize maintaining Peter's cooperation over prosecuting his obvious treason. A brewery worker shouldn't have connections to professional athletes or receive tryout opportunities without significant behind-the-scenes influence. When Peter's behavior becomes disruptive and he gets traded to London's silly nannies, it resembles witness protection relocation rather than normal sports discipline. The Griffin family's financial resources throughout both episodes raise additional questions. Peter funds elaborate schemes like international diplomacy and professional athletics despite his supposedly working-class income. Witness protection programs typically provide substantial living allowances to keep protected individuals satisfied and compliant with their new identities. The backgrounds of Cleveland, Quagmire, and Joe also support this interpretation. A government employee, a pilot with unclear employment history, and a disabled police officer with military equipment access could represent fellow protected witnesses or undercover agents assigned to monitor the Griffins while maintaining suburban cover stories. The family's repeated ability to reset their circumstances after major disasters indicates institutional support beyond normal legal systems. Whether creating sovereign nations or international sporting scandals, Peter always returns to baseline suburban life without lasting consequences, exactly what federal protection programs aim to achieve. Don't forget to subscribe if you're enjoying this series. The next theory won't surprise you at all. You've probably imagined it before. Stewie Griffin's sophisticated vocabulary, strategic planning abilities, and obsession with world domination suggest he may be the reincarnation of a historical dictator rather than an ordinary infant. His advanced military knowledge and authoritarian tendencies indicate a consciousness shaped by previous experience ruling nations through fear and violence. While this theory enjoys popularity among fans, the provided episodes don't actually support the reincarnated dictator interpretation as strongly as fans might claim. The transcripts show Stewie primarily focused on matricide rather than global conquest, and his behavior stems more from family dysfunction than political ambition. In Stewie Kills Lois, his attempt to murder his mother appears motivated by personal resentment rather than dictatorial impulses. When he tells Peter that last week, when he made that macaroni picture of an owl, Peter didn't give a damn, it reveals typical childhood attention-seeking rather than the calculated psychology of a reborn tyrant. His macaroni art complaints sound more like normal toddler frustration than memories of commanding armies. The interrogation scene where Stewie forces Brian to mock Joe's disability shows manipulative tendencies, but these feel more like learned sociopathy from his dysfunctional family environment. When he makes Brian say he bets he can't get a boner to Joe, it demonstrates crude understanding of social weakness rather than sophisticated political strategy. Lois Kills Stewie provides stronger evidence through Stewie's ability to evade law enforcement. His casual dismissal of police officers using different accents and personas suggests experience with deception and authority manipulation. When he tells one officer, in a fake foreign accent, that Mr. Superman is not here, it indicates practiced skill at assuming false identities. However, the episodes focus more on domestic violence than political themes. Stewie's conflict with Lois centers on maternal neglect rather than ideological differences or territorial ambitions. His weapons knowledge and strategic thinking could easily be explained by his genius-level intelligence and media exposure rather than past life memories. The reincarnated dictator theory requires assuming Stewie possesses memories and skills from a previous existence, but the transcripts suggest his abilities develop from present circumstances. His sophisticated language and planning skills appear throughout the series as consistent character traits rather than gradually emerging memories. While Stewie certainly displays authoritarian personality traits and unusual knowledge for his age, interpreting these as evidence of reincarnation requires significant speculation beyond what the episodes actually demonstrate. His behavior fits equally well with other explanations for his advanced development and aggressive tendencies. Lois is many things, but is she a cheat? The next theory will try to convince you. What if I told you that Lois Griffin might not be the faithful wife she appears to be? While we usually focus on Peter's ridiculous antics and obvious flaws, there's a darker theory lurking beneath the surface about Lois's true character. Today, we're digging into the evidence that suggests Lois might be cheating on Peter far more than the show lets on. This theory started gaining steam around 2007 and 2008, when fans began looking more closely at Lois's behavior patterns. Sure, Peter's the obvious problem in their marriage, but what if Lois has her own secrets? What if her seemingly patient, long-suffering wife act is actually covering up her own infidelity? In Meet the Quagmires, we get a fascinating glimpse into an alternate timeline that reveals some uncomfortable truths about Lois. When Peter travels back to 1984 and stands up his teenage girlfriend, Lois doesn't just move on. she immediately jumps into Quagmire's arms and marries him. Now, you might think this is just because Peter wasn't there, but look deeper at what actually happens. The speed of Lois's emotional transfer is honestly shocking. She goes from being supposedly in love with Peter to falling for Glenn after a single missed date. When she tells Peter there was a time back when they dated that she thought he might be the one, but he was more interested in partying with his friends, it reveals something crucial. She had backup options ready to go. Even more telling is how she describes falling for Quagmire. She says Glenn stole her heart when he kissed her that night at the country club dance. This suggests she was emotionally available to other men even while supposedly committed to Peter. The fact that one kiss from another guy completely changes her life trajectory indicates either incredibly shallow feelings for Peter or pre-existing romantic interest elsewhere. What really stands out is how comfortable Lois seems with this transition. She doesn't appear heartbroken about losing Peter. She's genuinely happy with Quagmire. She even tells Peter she loves Glenn's sex jokes and dirty puns, showing she craves attention and validation Peter clearly wasn't providing. This makes you wonder, in the original timeline, where else might she be seeking that validation? Throughout the series, we see Lois form suspiciously close relationships with other men. She gets emotionally invested in male friends, appreciates masculine attention, and seems to thrive when men treat her as more than just Peter's wife. The alternate timeline in Meet the Quagmires suggests this isn't just innocent friendship. It's a pattern of behavior that could easily cross into infidelity territory. The theory here is that what we see on screen, the occasional flirtation, the emotional connections with other men, the quick romantic pivot in the alternate timeline, are just the visible tips of a much larger iceberg. Lois's comfortable transition between partners and her apparent readiness to emotionally invest in men other than Peter suggests someone already practiced at maintaining multiple romantic options. This reframes their entire marriage dynamic. Maybe Lois isn't just patiently enduring Peter's stupidity. Maybe she's actively seeking fulfillment elsewhere while maintaining the facade of a loyal wife. Have you considered that Peter could serve a cosmic purpose? Some people have, and in the next segment, you'll see why. What if Peter Griffin's seemingly endless ability to survive impossible situations isn't just cartoon logic, but something much deeper? Today, we're exploring a theory suggesting that Death himself has been deliberately keeping Peter alive for reasons that go far beyond what we see on the surface. This theory started gaining attention around 2004 and 2005, when fans began noticing patterns in how Peter interacts with death and destruction. While most cartoon characters survive because of genre conventions, Peter's relationship with mortality seems oddly personal and intentional. In Death is a Bitch, we get our first major clue when Death literally comes to Peter's house for dinner. Now, think about this. Death doesn't just show up at random people's homes for casual meals. He's there because Peter tried to fake his own death on a medical form. But what's fascinating is how their interaction unfolds. Death doesn't immediately drag Peter away. Instead, he sits down for turkey dinner and starts bonding with the family. What really stands out is how Death treats Peter throughout this episode. When Peter injures Death's ankle during an escape attempt, Death ends up staying at the Griffin house to recover. This isn't the behavior of some cosmic force collecting souls. This feels personal. Death even seems to enjoy Peter's company, despite being frustrated by his antics. Then, there's the crucial moment when Death spares Peter's life entirely. He tells Lois he'll let Peter live, but the reasoning feels incomplete. Why would Death, whose job is literally collecting souls, make exceptions for someone who tried to cheat the system, unless Peter serves some purpose that even Death recognizes? In Wasted Talent, we see Peter's relationship with mortality play out differently, but equally revealing. During his quest to find the Silver Scroll in the Pawtucket Brewery contest, Peter engages in increasingly dangerous behavior, heavy drinking, reckless stunts, putting himself in harm's way repeatedly. Yet somehow, he keeps surviving situations that should absolutely kill him. What's interesting is how other characters react to Peter's seemingly invincible nature. His family expects him to survive his ridiculous adventures, almost as if they unconsciously know he's protected. Even when Peter does incredibly stupid things, there's an underlying assumption that he'll make it through somehow. The theory suggests that Peter serves as some kind of cosmic balance in the universe. His actions, while seemingly random and destructive, might actually prevent worse catastrophes from occurring. Think about it. Peter's chaos is usually contained to his immediate surroundings. His disasters are manageable, localized, and often resolve themselves. What if Peter's role is to absorb and dissipate negative energy that might otherwise manifest as larger tragedies? This would explain Death's reluctance to collect Peter. If Peter's chaotic energy serves a universal purpose, removing him could upset some cosmic equilibrium. Death might understand that Peter's seemingly meaningless adventures actually serve as a pressure release valve for the universe's destructive forces. It also explains why Peter's family, despite constant frustration, never truly abandons him. On some subconscious level, they might sense his importance to the cosmic order. Even when Peter's behavior becomes unbearable, they stick together because breaking apart the Griffin family unit could have consequences beyond their understanding. This theory reframes Peter's entire character. Instead of being just a bumbling fool who stumbles through life, he becomes an unwitting cosmic guardian whose very existence maintains universal stability. His stupidity isn't a flaw. It's a feature that keeps him from becoming too self-aware of his actual purpose. Death's protective attitude toward Peter suddenly makes perfect sense. He's not just sparing one man's life, he's maintaining the balance that keeps reality functioning properly. Like and subscribe if you're enjoying this series, and brace yourself for the next weird theory. What if everything we think we know about the Griffin family's hometown is completely wrong? Today, we're diving into one of the more mind-bending theories about Family Guy, the idea that Quahog, Rhode Island, doesn't actually exist at all, but is instead a product of someone's imagination. And the most likely candidate for that someone is Stewie Griffin himself. This theory started gaining momentum around 2009 and 2010, when fans began noticing just how bizarre and inconsistent Quahog really is as a place. Think about it. What kind of town allows the constant chaos that happens there? Where else could Peter Griffin blow things up, start international incidents, and create sovereign nations without any lasting consequences? In Road to the Multiverse, we see Stewie casually demonstrate his ability to travel between different realities and universes. But here's what's interesting. Every universe they visit operates on different rules, different logic, different physics. Some are cartoon-like, others are more realistic, and some are completely abstract. The ease with which Stewie navigates these realities suggests he's not just visiting them, he might be creating them. The theory proposes that what we think of as the real Quahog is actually just another one of Stewie's constructed realities. This would explain the town's impossible geography, where locations seem to change based on what the story needs. It explains why the same building can be a restaurant one week and a government office the next. It explains why physics work differently depending on the situation. In Viewer Mail, we see how easily reality can be altered in the Griffin universe. Peter makes wishes that fundamentally change how his body works, removing his bones entirely and somehow still functioning. In a normal world, this would be impossible, but in a reality constructed by an infant genius's imagination, anything becomes possible. The supporting evidence is actually pretty compelling when you think about it. Stewie is clearly the most intellectually advanced character in the show, capable of building time machines and interdimensional devices. He also shows signs of having an incredibly active imagination and a desire to control his environment. What if Quahog is his ultimate sandbox? a place where he can experiment with different scenarios, different versions of his family, different outcomes. This would explain why the show can reset itself after major catastrophes, why characters can die and come back, why the family's economic situation changes wildly from episode to episode, why neighbors like Quagmire and Cleveland have such exaggerated, almost archetypal personalities. They're not real people, they're characters in Stewie's ongoing mental simulation. It also explains the show's relationship with pop culture and time. How else could a show set in the present day constantly reference events and media from decades past with perfect accuracy, unless it's all happening in the mind of someone who has access to vast amounts of information and can reconstruct any time period he wants? The theory suggests that everything we see, Peter's job at the brewery, Lois's piano teaching, Brian's writing aspirations, Meg's high school struggles, are all projections of how Stewie imagines adult life works. They're filtered through the perspective of an infant trying to understand the adult world around him. But here's where this theory gets really dark. If Quahog is Stewie's mental construction, what does that say about his real situation? Is he actually trapped somewhere, using his imagination to escape? Is the real Griffin family very different from what we see? The theory opens up some uncomfortable questions about what might actually be happening to create the need for such an elaborate fantasy world. This interpretation reframes the entire show as the internal monologue of a genius child trying to make sense of a world that's either too complex or too traumatic for him to process directly. There's a theory out there that Peter could actually be secretly rich. Let's check it out. Think about this for a moment. How does the Griffin family maintain their lifestyle when Peter constantly gets fired, quits jobs impulsively, or goes months without working? Today, we're exploring a theory that suggests Peter Griffin isn't actually the working-class everyman he appears to be, but instead has access to secret wealth that keeps his family afloat. This theory started circulating around 2011 and 2012, when fans began noticing the mathematical impossibility of the Griffin family's financial situation. Peter works at a brewery for what appears to be a modest salary, yet they own a 2-story house, multiple cars, and can afford constant restaurant meals, vacations, and Peter's endless expensive schemes. In Lottery Fever, we see how Peter reacts when he thinks he's won millions. His immediate response is to quit his job and start spending wildly on ridiculous purchases. But here's what's interesting. Even before winning the lottery, Peter regularly engages in expensive activities. He takes out a second mortgage to buy $200,000 in lottery tickets without seeming particularly concerned about the financial risk. This suggests someone with either access to substantial funds or complete detachment from normal financial consequences. What's even more revealing is how quickly Peter burns through the lottery winnings. $150 million gone in just 1 month. Yet at the end of the episode, when they're supposedly broke again, the family doesn't appear to be living dramatically differently than before. They're back in the same house, wearing the same clothes, eating the same food. If they were truly destitute, we'd expect to see real hardship, but instead, everything just resets to normal. The theory suggests several possible sources for Peter's hidden wealth. First, there's his father-in-law, Carter Pewterschmidt, who's established as extremely wealthy. While Carter often claims to disapprove of Peter, he might be secretly supporting the family to ensure his daughter and grandchildren maintain a certain standard of living. The show has hinted at this dynamic before, Carter stepping in during financial emergencies while publicly maintaining his disdain for Peter. Another possibility is inheritance from Peter's own family. We know Peter comes from a complicated family background with various relatives who could have left him money. His casual attitude toward large expenses suggests someone who's never really worried about money running out because there's always been more available. The most compelling evidence is Peter's complete lack of anxiety about money despite his supposedly precarious employment situation. Normal working-class people don't casually take out second mortgages for lottery tickets or quit their jobs on whims. Peter's behavior suggests someone with a significant financial safety net that he either doesn't talk about or doesn't fully understand himself. This theory also explains why Lois, who comes from wealth herself, married Peter and stays with him despite his constant irresponsibility. If Peter genuinely threatened their family's financial security on a regular basis, someone with Lois's background and options would likely have left long ago. But if she knows there's always backup money available, his antics become mere inconveniences rather than genuine threats. The hidden wealth theory reframes Peter's character from a struggling working man into someone playing at being middle class while secretly protected by family money he either doesn't acknowledge or takes completely for granted. But what if Brian isn't alive at all? This next segment explores the possibility of Brian being a ghost. What if Brian Griffin isn't actually alive at all? This unsettling theory suggests that the Griffin family dog has been dead for years, existing as an alcoholic spirit who haunts the family while they remain largely oblivious to his true nature. The theory centers around Brian's relationship with alcohol and death throughout the series. His drinking problem isn't treated as typical substance abuse. It's portrayed as something deeper, more existential. In Brian and Stewie, we see Brian carrying a flask in what appears to be a bank vault, treating alcohol less like recreation and more like a necessity for his existence. What's particularly telling is how Brian describes saving his alcohol for something important, suggesting he's rationing it for a specific purpose. The theory proposes that alcohol serves as Brian's anchor to the physical world. Without it, he might fade away entirely. This would explain his constant need to drink and his philosophical conversations about existence and purpose. The ghost theory gains credibility when considering Brian's unique position in the Griffin household. He's the only character who regularly engages in deep, meaningful conversations about life, death, and existence. He often seems detached from the family's day-to-day concerns, observing their chaos from an almost otherworldly perspective. His writing aspirations could represent a ghost, trying to leave something permanent behind before moving on. In Life of Brian, when Brian actually dies, the family's reaction seems oddly muted compared to what you'd expect if he'd been truly alive. The ease with which he returns to the family suggests this isn't the first time he's died and come back. The theory proposes that what the family thinks of as Brian's death was actually just a temporary weakening of his spiritual presence. Brian's alcoholism takes on new meaning under this interpretation. Rather than being a character flaw, his drinking becomes a tragic necessity, a dead soul clinging to existence through liquid courage and chemical dependency. His depression and nihilistic worldview make sense if he's trapped between life and death, unable to move on, but unable to truly live. However, this theory raises several concerns about how we discuss addiction and mental health. While the ghost interpretation is creative, it risks romanticizing alcoholism as something mystical rather than acknowledging it as a serious health condition. Real addiction causes genuine suffering and requires proper treatment, not supernatural explanations. The theory also potentially minimizes the very real experiences of people struggling with depression and existential questions. Brian's philosophical struggles resonate with viewers precisely because they reflect genuine human experiences with meaning, purpose, and mortality. From a storytelling perspective, the ghost theory doesn't align well with Family Guy's general approach to character development. The show typically treats Brian's issues straightforwardly rather than hiding deeper supernatural elements. His problems with alcohol and his search for meaning work effectively as realistic character traits without requiring paranormal explanations. While the alcoholic ghost theory offers an intriguing lens for viewing Brian's character, it's important to remember that addiction and mental health struggles are real issues that deserve serious consideration rather than supernatural reframing. Terrestrial stories bore some fans, so they found a link between the Griffins and Cthulhu. What if the Griffin family's chaotic existence isn't just bad luck or cartoon physics, but something far more sinister? This tongue-in-cheek theory suggests that Peter, Lois, and their children might be descendants of cosmic horror entities like Cthulhu, which would explain their ability to survive impossible situations and attract supernatural chaos wherever they go. This theory operates more as creative fan speculation than serious analysis, treating the show's absurdist elements as potential evidence of otherworldly heritage. The premise is that the Griffins' seemingly endless encounters with paranormal events and their immunity to normal consequences stem from their eldritch bloodline. In Petergeist, we see the Griffin household become a supernatural battleground when Peter disturbs Native American burial remains. What's notable isn't just that ghosts invade their home, but how casually the family adapts to the situation. Most people would be traumatized by poltergeist activity, yet the Griffins treat it as another Tuesday inconvenience. The theory suggests this comfort with the supernatural indicates they're not entirely human themselves. The episode also shows Stewie getting pulled into a spirit dimension through their television, then later rescued through an interdimensional portal located in Meg's body. Normal families don't typically have members who can survive in supernatural realms or serve as gateways between dimensions. The Griffins handle these events with remarkable resilience, suggesting they might be naturally equipped to deal with cosmic horrors. In Road to the Multiverse, Stewie casually demonstrates technology that allows travel between infinite parallel realities. The theory proposes that his ability to create such devices stems from inherited knowledge of cosmic forces beyond human understanding. His infant genius isn't just exceptional intelligence, it's ancestral memory from beings that exist outside normal space and time. The supporting evidence includes the family's supernatural resilience. Peter regularly survives injuries that should kill any normal person. Experiences that would drive ordinary minds to madness barely register with him, and he attracts bizarre situations with supernatural frequency. This could indicate he's protected by, or descended from, entities that exist beyond normal physical laws. However, this theory requires significant creative interpretation rather than textual evidence. While entertaining as a thought experiment, it's important to note that Family Guy operates primarily as satirical comedy, not cosmic horror. The show's absurdist elements serve comedic purposes rather than building a coherent mythology about eldritch heritage. The theory also risks overinterpreting coincidental similarities between comedy tropes and horror themes. Just because the Griffins encounter supernatural situations doesn't necessarily indicate cosmic ancestry. It more likely reflects the show's willingness to explore any premise for comedic effect. From a practical standpoint, this interpretation treats the show's cartoon logic as if it requires supernatural explanation, when the real answer is that Family Guy operates according to comedy rules rather than realistic consequences. The family's resilience serves the show's episodic format rather than suggesting otherworldly origins. While the Cthulhu theory offers an amusing lens for viewing the Griffin family's adventures, it remains firmly in the realm of creative fan speculation rather than supported analysis. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this series. The next theory attempts to find who's responsible for Peter's constant misfortunes. What if Peter Griffin's constant misfortunes aren't just bad luck or his own stupidity, but the result of deliberate sabotage? This theory suggests that Carter Pewterschmidt, Lois's wealthy father, uses his vast resources and connections to orchestrate disasters in Peter's life as punishment for marrying his daughter. Carter never hides his contempt for Peter. From their first meeting, he's made it clear that he considers Peter beneath his family's social standing. But what if his disapproval extends far beyond snide remarks and social snubs? What if Carter has been actively working behind the scenes to make Peter's life as difficult as possible? In Screwed the Pooch, we see just how far Carter will go when someone crosses him. When Brian gets involved with his prize dog, Seabreeze, Carter doesn't just express disappointment. He mobilizes an entire network of resources. He hires investigators, uses legal connections, and coordinates with his wealthy friends to track Brian down. The speed and efficiency with which he orchestrates this operation reveals someone with serious power and influence. During the custody battle, Carter demonstrates his ability to manipulate legal proceedings and present damaging evidence. He has access to detailed personal information about Brian's past, rental records, and seemingly irrelevant details that suggest extensive surveillance capabilities. This isn't just wealth. This is someone with the infrastructure to monitor and investigate people's lives in detail. In Welcome Back, Carter, we get glimpses of Carter's social circle and the extent of his connections. These aren't just rich friends having dinner parties. These are people with real power in business, politics, and society. When Carter mentions his various acquaintances and their capabilities, it becomes clear that he has access to networks that could influence almost any aspect of someone's life. Think about Peter's pattern of misfortunes throughout the series. He regularly loses jobs despite being generally competent at basic tasks. He encounters bizarre legal troubles that somehow always resolve themselves in strange ways. He gets involved in increasingly absurd situations that most normal people would never experience. The disasters often involve authority figures, corporate bureaucracy, or government officials, exactly the areas where Carter's influence would be most effective. Carter's wealth isn't just about having nice things, it's about having power over other people's lives. When you have his level of resources, you can make phone calls that get people fired, pull strings that create legal complications, or arrange coincidental encounters that lead to chaos. Peter's workplace problems frequently involve corporate restructuring or authority conflicts. His legal troubles often appear out of nowhere and disappear just as mysteriously. Even Peter's bizarre adventures could be orchestrated through Carter's connections. Need Peter to get involved in a celebrity scandal? Carter knows entertainment industry executives. Want Peter to stumble into a political situation? Carter has government contacts. Looking to create a medical emergency? Carter sits on hospital boards. The most convincing evidence might be the timing of Peter's disasters. They often seem to occur just when things are going well for the Griffin family, as if someone is deliberately preventing them from achieving stability or success. Every time Peter shows signs of growth or responsibility, something catastrophic happens to reset his circumstances. Carter has both the means and the motive. His hatred for Peter is genuine and deep-seated, and his resources are virtually unlimited. For someone who views Peter as an ongoing insult to his family's reputation, orchestrating a campaign of subtle sabotage would be both satisfying and well within his capabilities. The beauty of this theory is that Carter's influence would be invisible to Peter himself. Peter would just see a series of unfortunate events and bad luck, never realizing that each disaster was carefully orchestrated by his father-in-law's network of powerful connections. There's something off about Lois. Is she a spy hiding among the Griffins, or is she an alien hiding among the Griffins? Check the next theory to find out. What if Lois Griffin's seemingly supernatural survival skills and occasional superhuman abilities aren't just cartoon logic, but evidence that she's actually an extraterrestrial being disguised as a human housewife? We explore this theory, suggesting that Lois has been hiding her true alien nature while living among the Griffin family. Throughout the series, Lois demonstrates abilities that go far beyond what any normal human should possess. Her combat skills, survival instincts, and capacity to endure extreme situations suggest someone with enhanced physical capabilities. Most humans don't casually survive explosions, gunfights, and the constant chaos that surrounds the Griffin household. yet Lois handles these situations with remarkable composure. In Lois Kills Stewie, we see Lois display tactical knowledge and fighting abilities that seem to come from nowhere. Her ability to track down and confront Stewie, despite his advanced technology and planning, suggests someone with enhanced intelligence or possibly telepathic abilities. She navigates complex situations with an almost preternatural understanding of what's happening around her. Her strategic thinking during crisis situations often surpasses what we'd expect from a piano teacher and housewife. Lois consistently outmaneuvers opponents who should have significant advantages over her, as if she's drawing on knowledge or abilities her human identity can't explain. In Mind Over Murder, we see more evidence of Lois's unusual nature. Her reactions to bizarre situations, like Stewie's microscopic adventure inside Peter's body, are surprisingly calm and adaptable. Most people would be completely overwhelmed by such surreal circumstances, but Lois treats them as manageable problems to solve. The theory suggests that Lois's occasional slip-ups reveal her alien nature. Her perfect pronunciation of obscure words, her uncanny ability to remain calm during supernatural events, and her sometimes eerily accurate predictions about family situations could all indicate someone with access to advanced knowledge or enhanced cognitive abilities. Her relationship with Peter also supports this theory. Why would someone with Lois's apparent intelligence and capabilities choose to stay with someone as chaotic and irresponsible as Peter, unless she's studying human behavior for research purposes, or Peter serves some function in her mission that we don't understand? Lois's parenting style also seems oddly detached at times, as if she's observing human family dynamics rather than naturally participating in them. Her ability to switch between loving mother and cold strategist suggests someone who's learned to mimic human emotions rather than genuinely experiencing them. The alien theory would explain why Lois rarely seems genuinely surprised by the supernatural events that constantly occur around her family. While other characters react with shock to time travel, interdimensional portals, and talking animals, Lois adapts with suspicious ease. Her musical abilities, particularly her perfect pitch and sophisticated understanding of composition, could indicate someone with enhanced sensory capabilities typical of a more advanced species. The way she processes complex information and makes connections that others miss suggests cognitive abilities beyond normal human range. If Lois is indeed an alien, it raises fascinating questions about her true mission on Earth and whether the Griffin family's constant adventures are somehow connected to her extraterrestrial agenda. We all know how dark Stewie can be. Do you think he could have killed a twin in the womb? Some fans think so. Stewie killed a sibling at birth, seasons 3 and 5. When Family Guy hinted that Stewie might have eliminated competition early, it got disturbing. What if Stewie Griffin's violent tendencies and sophisticated intelligence aren't just unusual baby traits, but evidence that he eliminated a twin or sibling at birth? This disturbing theory suggests that Stewie's first murder wasn't attempted matricide, but fratricide committed in the womb or delivery room. The theory builds on Stewie's consistently violent behavior throughout the series. Unlike typical cartoon violence, Stewie's aggression feels calculated and purposeful. He demonstrates advanced planning abilities, tactical thinking, and a complete lack of empathy that seems unusual even for Family Guy's exaggerated character traits. His intelligence level also appears unnaturally advanced for an infant, suggesting he might have absorbed capabilities from another source. In Mind Over Murder, we see Stewie go to extraordinary lengths to prevent Peter and Lois from conceiving another child. His desperate mission to stop a potential sibling from being born reveals an intense fear of competition for parental attention. But what if this isn't his first time dealing with sibling rivalry? The episode shows Stewie's willingness to commit violence to maintain his position as the baby of the family. His encounter with the sperm cell, which he initially tries to destroy, then befriends, becomes particularly significant under this interpretation. When Stewie forms an alliance with the sperm, calling it his brother, it mirrors how he might have initially bonded with a twin before circumstances changed. The eventual betrayal and destruction of this potential sibling could represent a pattern of behavior. In Stewie Loves Lois, we see more evidence of Stewie's complex relationship with maternal affection and his extreme reactions when that attention is threatened or withdrawn. His dramatic mood swings between loving devotion and murderous rage suggest someone who's fought for exclusive parental love before. The intensity of his attachment to Lois feels desperate, as if he's protecting something he had to fight to obtain. The theory proposes that Stewie was originally part of a multiple birth, either twins or triplets. During gestation or shortly after birth, he eliminated his siblings through some form of violence or manipulation. This would explain his advanced development, as he might have absorbed nutrients, space, or even neurological development that should have been shared. This early act of fratricide would also explain Stewie's sophisticated understanding of violence and death. He doesn't approach murder with childish curiosity. He handles it with the confidence of someone who's done it before and succeeded. His various schemes against Lois feel like refinements of techniques he's already tested. The dark nature of this theory reflects how Family Guy often explores disturbing themes through dark comedy. Stewie's character already embodies many unsettling concepts: an infant with adult intelligence, murderous intentions, and possible sexual awareness. Adding sibling murder to his background would fit the show's willingness to push boundaries. However, this theory ventures into genuinely disturbing territory that goes beyond typical fan speculation. It involves infanticide and suggests Stewie's character represents someone who committed murder as a newborn. While Family Guy certainly explores dark themes, this interpretation attributes genuinely horrific acts to a character who, despite his violent tendencies, is still portrayed as a baby within a family comedy. The theory also lacks substantial evidence from the show itself. While Stewie's behavior is certainly extreme, attributing it to past sibling murder requires significant speculation that isn't supported by the actual content of these episodes. The next theory considers the idea that the whole show is just a fever dream. Stay tuned. What if the entire Family Guy series isn't actually happening, but exists entirely within Peter Griffin's unconscious mind while he's lying in a coma somewhere? What are the odds that all the bizarre adventures, impossible scenarios, and reality-bending moments we see are products of Peter's dreaming brain trying to process his life and memories? The dream theory gained traction because of how frequently Family Guy breaks its own rules of reality. Characters die and return without explanation. The family's house gets destroyed and rebuilt, and Peter survives injuries that should kill any normal person. In most shows, this would be considered inconsistent writing. But what if it's actually the logical inconsistency we'd expect from someone's dreams? In Da Boom, we see the Griffin family navigate a post-apocalyptic world after Y2K destroys civilization. The episode features completely impossible scenarios: Peter mutating into a giant, the family rebuilding society, and eventually everything resetting to normal by the end. This type of dramatic reality shift, followed by a return to baseline, is exactly what we'd expect in a dream sequence. The way characters behave in dreams often differs from their waking personalities, and this could explain some of the more extreme character traits we see. Stewie's advanced intelligence and violent tendencies, Brian's human-like behavior and philosophical nature, and Lois's occasional superhuman abilities all make more sense as exaggerated dream versions of real people Peter knows. In Back to the Pilot, Stewie and Brian travel back to the very first episode, which creates an interesting meta-commentary on the show's own evolution. But what if this episode represents Peter's dreaming mind, trying to make sense of how his mental world began? The ability to travel through time and revisit past episodes of his life could represent how dreams allow us to revisit and recontextualize memories. The theory suggests that Peter might be in a coma following one of his many real-life accidents, perhaps a workplace injury at the brewery, a car crash, or even just a simple fall. His unconscious mind creates elaborate fantasy scenarios featuring his family and friends, but processed through the lens of his personality and interests. This would explain the show's obsession with pop culture references and cutaway gags. In dreams, our minds often pull random memories and combine them in strange ways. Peter's love of television and movies would naturally influence his dream content, creating the constant stream of references and parodies that define the show. The inconsistent timeline also supports this theory. Characters age inconsistently, major events get forgotten, and the family's economic situation changes wildly between episodes. This mirrors how dreams often lack continuity and logic, jumping between scenarios without concern for consistency. The supporting characters in Peter's life, Joe, Quagmire, Cleveland, might represent real neighbors or co-workers, but their extreme personality traits are amplified by Peter's dreaming mind. Joe's heroic police officer persona, Quagmire's exaggerated sexuality, and Cleveland's patient friendliness could all be dream versions of more ordinary people. Even the show's animation style supports this interpretation. The simple, bold character designs and bright colors are exactly what we might expect from someone's mental visualization of their world. The way characters can stretch, deform, and survive impossible situations mirrors the elastic nature of dream physics. If Peter is indeed dreaming the entire series, it raises questions about what his real-life situation might be and whether he'll ever wake up to discover that his elaborate mental adventures were just products of his unconscious mind, processing trauma, memories, and imagination. Maybe Brian is Stewie's guardian angel. It's possible. That's what the next theory explores. What if Brian Griffin isn't just the family dog, but actually serves as Stewie's guardian angel, sent to guide the infant away from his violent tendencies and toward moral development? This theory suggests that Brian's unique relationship with Stewie goes beyond friendship. He's literally there to save Stewie's soul from damnation. The guardian angel theory builds on the unusually deep bond between Brian and Stewie throughout the series. While other family members often dismiss or misunderstand Stewie, Brian consistently engages with him as an equal. Their relationship transcends the typical pet-owner dynamic and feels more like a spiritual mentorship, with Brian often serving as Stewie's moral compass during their adventures. In Brian and Stewie, we see the most intimate portrayal of their relationship when they're trapped together in a bank vault overnight. Throughout this intense, isolated experience, Brian demonstrates remarkable patience and sacrifice for Stewie's well-being. When Stewie needs care and finds himself in an embarrassing situation with his soiled diaper, Brian overcomes his own disgust and pride to help him. This selfless devotion suggests someone whose primary purpose is Stewie's welfare, regardless of personal cost or dignity. During their deeper conversations in the vault, Brian consistently tries to guide Stewie toward better understanding of relationships, empathy, and human connection. When they share alcohol and Stewie opens up emotionally, Brian encourages his vulnerability and personal growth. He listens to Stewie's confessions about his insecurities and need for acceptance, providing the kind of non-judgmental support that helps Stewie develop emotional maturity. Even when they argue and deliberately hurt each other's feelings in moments of frustration, Brian ultimately forgives and continues to care for Stewie, demonstrating the unconditional love we'd expect from a divine guardian. The episode also reveals Brian's willingness to engage in Stewie's seemingly frivolous requests, like piercing his ear, because he recognizes these moments as opportunities for bonding and trust building. A guardian angel's job isn't to eliminate all fun or spontaneity, but to be present during vulnerable moments and ensure they don't lead to genuine harm. In Road to the Multiverse, Brian accompanies Stewie on his interdimensional travels, serving as his anchor to morality and common sense throughout their journey across parallel realities. While Stewie gets excited about the technological possibilities and power of universe hopping, Brian consistently reminds him about responsibility, consequences, and the importance of not interfering with other realities. This guidance helps prevent Stewie from becoming corrupted by his own abilities or developing a god complex from his advanced technology. Throughout their multiverse adventure, Brian serves as Stewie's ethical compass, questioning decisions that could harm others and encouraging respect for the inhabitants of each reality they visit. When Stewie becomes fascinated by the power to manipulate entire universes, Brian keeps him grounded in basic moral principles about not playing with other people's lives. Brian's role as moral guide becomes even more significant when considering Stewie's dark tendencies throughout the series. Stewie demonstrates capacity for violence, manipulation, world domination schemes, and complete disregard for human life. Yet in Brian's presence, these impulses often get redirected toward more constructive ends. Brian doesn't eliminate Stewie's intelligence or ambition. Instead, he helps channel them in better directions, encouraging Stewie to use his gifts for creativity and exploration rather than destruction. The theory suggests that Brian was sent specifically to prevent Stewie from becoming truly evil. His presence in Stewie's life consistently pulls the infant back from his worst impulses and toward developing genuine emotional connections. Their adventures together often result in Stewie learning important lessons about friendship, sacrifice, and caring for others, lessons that gradually chip away at his sociopathic tendencies. Brian's own struggles with alcoholism and depression take on new meaning under this interpretation. Perhaps guardian angels aren't perfect beings, but rather souls who understand suffering and can therefore guide others through their own darkness. Brian's flaws make him more relatable to Stewie and more effective at reaching him when he's struggling with his own demons. The special nature of their communication also supports this theory. While the show is inconsistent about who can understand Stewie, Brian always seems to hear him clearly. This could indicate a spiritual connection that transcends normal physical limitations, allowing the guardian angel to maintain constant contact with his charge regardless of circumstances. If Brian is indeed Stewie's guardian angel, it suggests that despite his violent fantasies and advanced intelligence, Stewie's soul is worth saving, and that even the most troubled individuals can find redemption through genuine connection and patient moral guidance. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this series. The next theory questions how Stewie could possibly be the genius inventor at such a young age. What if Stewie Griffin's elaborate inventions, weather control devices, mind control rays, aren't actually real, but exist entirely within his vivid imagination? This theory asks whether what we see as sophisticated technology is actually the show's way of visualizing how a brilliant infant processes the world through creative play and fantasy. The imaginary inventions theory explains one of the most intriguing aspects of Stewie's character: how he manages to build impossibly advanced technology in his nursery without any visible materials, tools, or manufacturing equipment. When we see Stewie operating complex devices, we might actually be witnessing his imagination transforming simple household objects into elaborate contraptions through the power of creative visualization. In Viewer Mail, we see Stewie demonstrating various gadgets that seem to defy physics and engineering limitations. Notice how these demonstrations often happen when he's alone or with Brian, who consistently indulges his fantasies. The theory suggests these sequences represent Stewie's internal mental theater, where cardboard boxes become time machines and kitchen utensils transform into ray guns. The show's visual language supports this interpretation. Stewie's inventions often appear and disappear with suspicious convenience, exactly like props in imaginative play. One moment he's wielding a sophisticated device, The next, it's nowhere to be seen. This inconsistency makes perfect sense if we're watching the fluid nature of childhood imagination rather than actual technology. In Road to Germany, Stewie and Brian's elaborate time travel adventure through Nazi Germany demonstrates the full scope of his imaginative capabilities. The entire sequence reads like an exceptionally detailed fantasy scenario that a brilliant child might construct while playing with toy soldiers or flipping through history books. Every element, from the period-appropriate dialogue to the historical encounters, reflects exactly the kind of immersive storytelling that gifted children create during solo play. Brian's role becomes particularly meaningful under this interpretation. Rather than a dog who somehow understands advanced physics, Brian represents the perfect imaginary companion, always available for adventures, never questioning the logic of impossible situations, and providing the emotional support that makes elaborate fantasy scenarios feel real and important. The theory explains why adults in the family rarely notice or react to Stewie's supposed inventions. When Lois walks into his room during these sequences, she might simply see her baby playing quietly with toys, completely unaware of the epic adventures unfolding in his mind. The sophisticated technology exists only in Stewie's imagination and in our visual representation of his internal world. Stewie's technical explanations and scientific jargon take on new significance as well. Instead of demonstrating actual knowledge, they represent his brilliant mind processing complex concepts he's absorbed from television, books, and overheard conversations. He weaves these fragments into coherent-sounding explanations that give structure to his imaginative play. The emotional truth behind Stewie's inventions becomes even more powerful when viewed as coping mechanisms. Unable to control his environment or assert independence as an infant, he creates elaborate mental scenarios where he possesses ultimate power and agency. His time machine isn't just a device, it's his way of escaping the limitations of his age and circumstance. This interpretation transforms every one of Stewie's adventures into a window into the mind of an extraordinary child, using imagination to bridge the gap between his intellectual capabilities and physical limitations. His laboratory becomes a playroom, his inventions become toys, and his grandiose schemes become the natural power fantasies of someone brilliant enough to envision them, but too young to actually implement them. The visual spectacle of Stewie's technology serves as Family Guy's way of honoring the boundless creativity of childhood imagination, showing us how the simplest objects can become anything when filtered through a mind unlimited by adult skepticism and practical constraints. When viewed through this lens, Stewie's character becomes a celebration of pure imaginative potential, reminding us of the incredible worlds that exist within the minds of creative children who refuse to be constrained by the ordinary limitations of reality. The next theory is a fun one, a nice break from all the weird, head-turning theories about our beloved characters. What if Family Guy and American Dad aren't just two separate animated comedies created by Seth MacFarlane, but actually take place in parallel dimensions within the same multiverse? Today, we explore the theory that the Griffin and Smith families exist in alternate versions of reality, with characters like Stewie and Roger serving as dimensional counterparts to each other. The parallel universe theory builds on the sophisticated multiverse concepts Family Guy has explored throughout its run. When Stewie demonstrates his ability to travel between infinite realities, he's essentially proving that multiple versions of existence operate simultaneously. This opens the door for American Dad to exist as simply another dimensional variation Stewie could theoretically access. In Road to the Multiverse, we see Stewie and Brian jumping between realities where fundamental aspects of their world are different. They visit dimensions where dogs rule humans, where everything is drawn by Disney, and where historical events unfolded differently. The ease with which they navigate these realities establishes that parallel universes are not only possible, but accessible within the Family Guy framework. The theory gains momentum when you consider the striking similarities between key characters across both shows. Stewie Griffin and Roger the Alien share remarkably similar personality traits. Both are narcissistic, manipulative, highly intelligent, and capable of elaborate schemes. They both possess advanced technology and knowledge that exceeds what should be available to their respective species. Most tellingly, they both display the same pattern of alternating between childish behavior and sophisticated adult reasoning. Roger's shape-shifting abilities mirror Stewie's tendency to take on different personas and identities throughout his adventures. Both characters serve as the chaos agents in their respective families, constantly creating complicated situations that drive their show's plots. They even share similar speech patterns and comedic timing, suggesting they might be dimensional variations of the same essential character archetype. The family dynamics also parallel each other in intriguing ways. Both shows feature a bumbling father figure who works in a blue-collar job despite his family's middle-class lifestyle. Peter Griffin's brewery work and Stan Smith's CIA position both provide convenient plot devices for getting their families involved in increasingly absurd situations. Lois and Francine serve similar roles as the long-suffering wives who somehow manage to keep their chaotic households functioning. In Big Trouble in Little Quahog, the show's continued exploration of size, manipulation, and alternate perspectives reinforces the idea that reality in the Family Guy universe is highly flexible and layered. When characters can shrink down to microscopic levels and encounter entirely different civilizations, it suggests that multiple layers of existence operate simultaneously within the same space. The crossover potential between the shows becomes even more compelling when you consider their shared creative DNA. Both series emerge from the same creative mind and share similar animation styles, humor sensibilities, and narrative structures. Rather than coincidental similarities, these could represent consistent elements that appear across different dimensional variations. The theory suggests that Seth MacFarlane isn't just creating separate shows, but actually documenting different slices of the same expanded universe. Each series represents a window into a different dimensional reality, where similar archetypal characters play out variations of the same cosmic themes. Stan Smith's government connections could even provide the in-universe explanation for why these parallel realities remain separate. Perhaps the CIA has technology that monitors interdimensional activity, keeping knowledge of alternate realities classified while occasionally allowing limited crossover between dimensions. This interpretation transforms both shows from standalone comedies into interconnected pieces of a larger multiversal puzzle. Every Family Guy episode becomes part of a vast web of parallel stories happening simultaneously across infinite realities, with American Dad representing just one of countless variations where the same essential character types exist in slightly different configurations. The parallel universe theory suggests that when we watch both shows, we're actually observing the same fundamental story playing out across different dimensional frequencies, each one exploring different aspects of family dysfunction, American culture, and the absurdity of modern existence through the lens of alternate reality. We all hate how Meg is treated in this family. This next theory debates the possibility that she's adopted. What if Meg Griffin's constant mistreatment by her family isn't just cruel comedy, but actually stems from the fact that she's not biologically related to them? This theory considers the possibility that Meg was adopted into the Griffin family, which would explain her different appearance, personality, and the persistent way she's treated as an outsider by her own relatives. The adoption theory addresses several puzzling aspects of Meg's character and her place in the family dynamic. Unlike her siblings, Meg looks noticeably different from both Peter and Lois. While Chris clearly resembles Peter and Stewie has Lois's facial structure, Meg's appearance seems to come from neither parent. Her brown hair contrasts with the family's predominantly blonde genetics, and her overall features suggest different ancestry entirely. More telling than physical differences is how the family treats Meg compared to the other children. While Peter might be frustrated with Chris's stupidity or annoyed by Stewie's schemes, his treatment of Meg goes beyond typical father-daughter tension into genuine cruelty and rejection. The consistency of this mistreatment suggests something deeper than normal family dysfunction. In Don't Make Me Over, we see Meg's transformation through a makeover that reveals she's actually quite attractive when given proper styling and attention. The family's shock at her beauty suggests they've never really looked at her as an individual worth noticing. When she becomes successful and confident, their reaction isn't pride, but resentment, as if her success threatens their established family hierarchy. The episode demonstrates how quickly Meg can integrate into different social circles when she's accepted and valued. Her immediate popularity and romantic success suggest she possesses social skills and attractiveness that were simply suppressed by her family environment. This adaptability could indicate she's naturally suited for a different type of family or social structure. In Seahorse Seashell Party, Meg finally confronts her family about their treatment of her, revealing deep insights into their dysfunction. Her ability to psychologically analyze each family member's problems suggests she's been observing them from an outsider's perspective rather than feeling truly integrated into their dynamics. This emotional distance could stem from unconsciously sensing she doesn't belong. The theory proposes that Peter and Lois adopted Meg as an infant but never told her the truth. Perhaps they took her in reluctantly, maybe as a favor to relatives or due to social pressure, and their resentment has manifested as ongoing rejection. This would explain why their mistreatment feels so personal and targeted compared to how they handle Chris and Stewie's problems. Meg's desperate need for acceptance and love makes more sense if she's unconsciously sensing that she doesn't truly belong. Her willingness to endure abuse rather than fight back could stem from fear that challenging the family might result in complete abandonment. She tolerates treatment that no biological child would accept because part of her knows her place in the family is tenuous. The adoption theory also explains why Meg often serves as the family scapegoat. In dysfunctional family systems, adopted children sometimes become repositories for the family's collective problems and tensions. By focusing their dysfunction on Meg, the other family members avoid confronting their own issues and maintain the illusion that she's the source of their problems. Peter's particular cruelty toward Meg could stem from guilt about never fully accepting her as his daughter, while Lois's enabling of this behavior might reflect her own ambivalence about the adoption. Even Chris and Stewie's casual acceptance of Meg's mistreatment suggests they've internalized the message that she's somehow different or less deserving of respect. If Meg discovered the truth about her adoption, it would provide a framework for understanding her entire family experience. The constant rejection, the feeling of not fitting in, and the sense that she's fundamentally different from her relatives would all make sense within the context of being an outsider who was never fully integrated into the family unit. This interpretation transforms Meg from a simple punching bag character into a tragic figure, someone desperately seeking love and acceptance from people who may never be capable of providing it because they've never truly seen her as family. God has favorites, so why not Satan? Some people believe Peter Griffin is Satan's favorite person. What if Peter Griffin's miraculous survival through countless disasters isn't luck or cartoon physics, but divine protection from the Prince of Darkness himself? This theory suggests that Satan has taken a special interest in Peter, keeping him alive and healthy because his behavior provides endless entertainment for the underworld. The Satan's favorite theory addresses one of the most puzzling aspects of Peter's character: his ability to survive situations that should absolutely kill him while simultaneously causing massive destruction around him. Normal people don't walk away from explosions, survive being crushed by heavy objects, or endure the kind of physical trauma Peter experiences on a regular basis, unless someone very powerful wants to keep him around. In Death Has a Shadow, we see Peter's pattern of terrible decision-making paired with impossible survival established right from the beginning. He gets drunk, loses his job, commits welfare fraud, and crashes a blimp at the Super Bowl, yet somehow emerges from each disaster relatively unscathed. This episode sets up the template for Peter's entire existence: make horrible choices, cause chaos, survive against all odds. The theory suggests that Peter's moral failures aren't character flaws, but features that make him valuable to Satan. His selfishness, dishonesty, and complete lack of empathy for others create a steady stream of suffering and corruption that feeds hell's purposes. Every time Peter lies to Lois, hurts his children's feelings, or destroys someone's property, he's essentially doing Satan's work without even realizing it. Peter's impact on other people's lives supports this interpretation perfectly. He routinely ruins relationships, destroys businesses, and causes emotional trauma wherever he goes. Yet instead of facing consequences that might lead to personal growth or redemption, he's protected from serious harm so he can continue his destructive rampage indefinitely. In the Cleveland-Loretta quagmire, we see Peter's casual cruelty toward his friends reach new levels. He shows no genuine concern for Cleveland's pain when Loretta cheats with Quagmire, treating the entire situation like entertainment. A normal person would feel guilt or try to help their friend through such a devastating betrayal. Peter just enjoys the drama while contributing nothing positive to resolve the situation. The satanic protection theory explains why Peter never learns from his mistakes or develops as a person. Growth and redemption would make him less useful to hell's purposes. By keeping him in a state of perpetual ignorance and selfishness, Satan ensures that Peter continues generating chaos and suffering for decades to come. Peter's relationship with Death also supports this theory. Throughout the series, Death treats Peter with unusual familiarity and patience, as if he's following orders from a higher authority to keep Peter alive. Even when Peter directly causes situations that should result in his death, Death seems reluctant to actually collect him. The protection extends beyond physical survival to social consequences as well. Peter regularly commits crimes, destroys property, and hurts people, yet he rarely faces legal punishment or social ostracism that would limit his ability to cause future harm. It's as if invisible forces are working to ensure he maintains his position and freedom to continue his destructive behavior. Satan's investment in Peter makes perfect business sense from hell's perspective. Why personally tempt millions of people towards sin when you can protect one incredibly effective chaos agent who corrupts everyone around him naturally? Peter is essentially a self-sustaining damnation machine, spreading misery and moral corruption wherever he goes without requiring direct demonic intervention. The theory suggests that Peter's stupidity isn't a limitation, but a carefully maintained feature. Intelligence might lead to self-awareness, guilt, or positive change, all things that would reduce his value as Satan's unwitting agent. By keeping him just smart enough to function, but too stupid to understand the consequences of his actions, hell ensures he'll never stop being useful. This interpretation transforms Peter from a lovable oaf into something much darker, a person whose very existence serves evil purposes, protected by supernatural forces specifically because his continued survival guarantees ongoing suffering for everyone around him. His family, friends, and community all pay the price for Satan's entertainment. Have you considered that every member of the Griffin family is insane? All except one. The next theory suggests Stewie might be the only sane person left. What if Stewie Griffin, despite being an infant, is actually the most psychologically healthy and rational member of his entire family? This theory suggests that beneath his elaborate schemes and violent fantasies, Stewie possesses genuine emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and logical thinking that far surpasses the dysfunction displayed by every other Griffin family member. The Stewie as the sane one theory challenges our assumptions about which characters represent normalcy in the Griffin household. While adults like Peter and Lois should theoretically be the stable influences, their behavior consistently demonstrates poor judgment, emotional immaturity, and an inability to learn from mistakes. Meanwhile, Stewie, despite his age and occasional megalomania, often displays remarkably sophisticated understanding of human psychology and social dynamics. In Send in Stewie, Please, we see Stewie in a therapy session that reveals his extraordinary emotional intelligence and perceptiveness. When he analyzes Dr. Pritchfield's life through careful observation, he demonstrates skills that most adults never develop. His ability to read people, understand motivations, and see through facades suggests someone with exceptional psychological awareness rather than mental instability. During the therapy session, Stewie shows genuine vulnerability and self-reflection when he admits to feeling lonely and struggling to fit in. This kind of honest emotional processing is something we rarely see from other family members, who typically deny problems or blame others for their issues. Stewie's willingness to examine his own behavior and seek understanding demonstrates emotional maturity that contrasts sharply with his family's typical avoidance patterns. The episode also reveals that Stewie's elaborate persona, his British accent, sophisticated vocabulary, and grandiose claims might be defense mechanisms rather than signs of instability. His admission that he feels different and wants to fit in suggests he's created an intellectual identity to cope with social isolation. This kind of adaptive behavior, while not entirely healthy, shows more self-awareness than his family's typically destructive coping strategies. In Road to Rupert, we see Stewie's deep emotional attachment to his teddy bear, which some might view as childish dependency. However, the theory suggests this attachment represents Stewie's ability to form meaningful emotional bonds and maintain consistency in relationships that other family members struggle with. His genuine grief when losing Rupert and his determination to recover him demonstrate emotional depth and loyalty. Throughout both episodes, Stewie's supposed insanity often manifests as logical responses to genuinely insane family situations. His frustration with his parents' incompetence, his desire for control in chaotic circumstances, and his elaborate plans to solve problems all make sense when viewed as attempts to impose reason on an unreasonable environment. The theory points out that Stewie's violent fantasies about Lois might represent normal childhood anger expressed through advanced vocabulary rather than genuine psychopathy. Most children occasionally wish their parents would disappear when they're frustrated, but they lack Stewie's ability to articulate these feelings in sophisticated terms. His murderous schemes could be elaborate expressions of typical toddler tantrums. Stewie's relationships also support this interpretation. His friendship with Brian demonstrates his capacity for genuine connection with someone he views as an intellectual equal. Their adventures together often show Stewie as the more emotionally stable partner, providing support and guidance when Brian struggles with depression or poor decisions. The family's treatment of Stewie further supports his role as the sane outsider. They consistently dismiss his observations and insights, even when he's clearly right about situations. This pattern mirrors how dysfunctional families often scapegoat or ignore the member who points out problems, preferring to maintain comfortable illusions rather than face difficult truths. Stewie's advanced intelligence becomes less of a cartoon gag and more of a survival mechanism under this interpretation. In a household where the adults regularly make dangerous, impulsive decisions, having one family member capable of logical thinking and long-term planning might be essential for everyone's survival. The theory suggests that Stewie's apparent psychological issues are actually rational responses to living with genuinely unstable people. His need for control, his detailed planning, and his emotional outbursts all make sense as coping mechanisms for someone intelligent enough to recognize the chaos around him, but too young to escape it. This interpretation transforms Stewie from comic relief into a tragic figure, a brilliant child trapped in a dysfunctional family, using his intellect to survive while desperately seeking the emotional connection and stability his family cannot provide. Sometimes some characters break the fourth wall, and it's not who you'll expect in the next theory. What if Mayor Adam West's seemingly random and nonsensical behavior wasn't mental illness, but actually evidence that he alone understood the true nature of Quahog as a fictional construct? The idea is that West's apparent insanity was really a sophisticated awareness of cartoon reality, making him the only character who truly grasped that he existed within an animated television show. The Mayor West knows the truth theory reframes his eccentric behavior as rational responses to living in an obviously artificial world. While other characters accept the absurd physics, impossible coincidences, and narrative conveniences of their reality, West's actions suggest someone who's figured out that normal rules don't apply because nothing around him is actually real. In 15 Minutes of Shame, we see West's peculiar relationship with media and public attention throughout the Griffin family's reality TV experience. His behavior during public events shows someone who understands he's performing for an audience that exists beyond the immediate fictional world. When he delivers speeches about Quahog's history, his theatrical presentation style suggests awareness that he's reciting exposition for viewers rather than genuinely informing citizens. West's telling of the Quahog founding myth, complete with a magic talking clam, reads like someone who knows he's delivering obviously fictional backstory. His delivery has the quality of an actor who's aware he's reading ridiculous dialogue but commits to the performance anyway. Most politicians would try to make local legends sound plausible, but West presents clearly fantastical elements with complete sincerity, as if he knows the audience expects cartoon logic. The theory gains strength from West's relationship with narrative structure throughout the series. His actions often seem disconnected from immediate plot concerns, but they frequently serve broader storytelling functions. He appears when episodes need authority figures, provides exposition when backstory is required, and disappears when his presence would complicate ongoing storylines. This suggests someone who understands his role as a supporting character rather than a fully autonomous individual. In Patriot Games, West's reactions to the various sports and political situations demonstrate his unique perspective on the show's reality. While other characters get emotionally invested in plot developments, West often seems detached, as if he's observing events from outside the narrative framework. His comments and reactions frequently have a metatextual quality that suggests awareness of broader context beyond what his characters should technically know. West's dialogue patterns also support this interpretation. He often makes references that seem anachronistic or contextually inappropriate, as if he has access to information from outside his fictional time frame. His cultural references span decades in ways that suggest knowledge of the real world beyond Quahog's supposed timeline. The mayor's apparent randomness might actually be strategic behavior designed to maintain his sanity while trapped in a fictional world. If he truly understands that he's a cartoon character in an animated series, his eccentric actions could represent attempts to assert some form of agency within predetermined narrative constraints. By acting unpredictably, he creates small spaces of autonomy within his scripted existence. West's interactions with other characters often have the quality of someone humoring people who don't understand their situation. He goes through the motions of municipal leadership while clearly recognizing the absurdity of governing a town where physics work inconsistently and major catastrophes resolve themselves within 22-minute timeframes. The theory suggests that West's knowledge creates a form of existential burden. He must continue playing his role as mayor while knowing that his decisions ultimately don't matter, because story requirements will override any logical governance. This cosmic awareness could explain his detachment from typical political concerns and his focus on seemingly trivial pursuits. His behavior becomes less random and more purposeful when viewed as someone trying to find meaning and entertainment within the constraints of a repetitive fictional format. Rather than going insane from cartoon logic, he's adapted to it by embracing the absurdity while maintaining secret knowledge of the truth. This interpretation transforms Mayor West from a simple comic relief character into a tragic figure, perhaps the only resident of Quahog who truly understands their reality, but who must keep this knowledge hidden to avoid breaking the fourth wall that maintains their world's existence. If you're enjoying this series, don't forget to like and subscribe. The next theory juggles the idea that Lois might have poisoned Peter. What if Peter Griffin's increasingly erratic behavior, declining intelligence, and deteriorating health aren't natural developments, but the result of systematic poisoning by his wife Lois? This disturbing theory suggests that Lois has been slowly administering toxins to keep Peter dependent, manageable, and unable to function without her constant care. The poisoning theory emerges from observing Peter's dramatic cognitive and physical decline throughout the series. Early episodes show Peter as crude, but relatively competent. He holds down jobs, makes decisions, and demonstrates basic problem-solving skills. As the series progresses, however, his intelligence appears to deteriorate significantly, his health becomes increasingly fragile, and his dependence on Lois grows more pronounced. In Peter Problems, we see Peter struggling with sexual dysfunction after losing his job and becoming a house husband. The theory suggests this isn't psychological emasculation, but physical evidence of Lois's poisoning strategy. His inability to perform sexually, combined with his increasing physical weakness and cognitive confusion, mirrors the symptoms of certain toxins administered in small doses over time. The episode shows Lois taking an unusually active role in Peter's medical care, accompanying him to doctors and controlling his treatment options. She's present for all medical consultations and has input on his prescribed medications. This positioning allows her to monitor his condition while ensuring no medical professional discovers the true cause of his symptoms. Throughout the series, Lois demonstrates extensive knowledge of cooking, chemistry, and household products, all potential sources for subtle poisoning agents. Her background includes piano lessons, which historically required knowledge of various chemicals, and her wealthy upbringing would have provided access to information about exotic substances. She consistently prepares Peter's meals and controls his diet, giving her unlimited opportunities to administer toxins. Peter's behavior patterns support this interpretation. His increasing childishness, memory problems, and impulsive actions align with neurological damage caused by prolonged exposure to certain chemicals. His frequent health scares, heart problems, weight issues, and various physical ailments could result from systematic organ damage rather than lifestyle choices. The theory proposes that Lois began poisoning Peter early in their marriage to maintain control over their relationship. As someone from a wealthy, sophisticated family, she may have felt trapped with a working-class husband who couldn't provide the lifestyle she expected. Rather than divorce him and face social stigma, she chose to gradually incapacitate him while positioning herself as the long-suffering, devoted wife. Lois's treatment of Peter often has the quality of someone managing a pet rather than relating to an equal partner. She speaks to him in simplified language, makes decisions without consulting him, and treats his opinions as irrelevant. This dynamic makes more sense if she's deliberately maintained his dependence through chemical manipulation. In Play It Again, Brian, we see Lois rejecting Brian's romantic advances while maintaining their close friendship. The episode reveals her sophisticated understanding of emotional manipulation and her ability to maintain multiple complex relationships simultaneously. Someone capable of such psychological complexity could easily orchestrate a long-term poisoning campaign. Peter's workplace difficulties throughout the series could stem from cognitive impairment rather than natural stupidity. His increasing inability to perform basic job functions, follow simple instructions, or maintain professional relationships suggests progressive neurological damage rather than character-based incompetence. The poisoning theory also explains why Peter's recovery from various health crises always seems incomplete. Each time he faces a major medical emergency, he returns to baseline functioning, but never improves beyond his current diminished capacity. This pattern suggests ongoing toxin exposure that prevents full recovery while maintaining plausible deniability about the underlying cause. Lois's reaction to Peter's brief periods of independence or success often involves increased attention to his meals, medication, or healthcare. When he shows signs of recovering his faculties or asserting autonomy, she becomes more involved in his daily routine, potentially adjusting her poisoning regimen to maintain control. This interpretation transforms Lois from a patient wife into a calculating predator who systematically destroyed her husband's health and cognitive function to maintain domestic control, making their entire marriage a decades-long crime in progress. If you don't think Lois poisoned Peter, maybe you'll buy the idea that the Griffins are immortal in our next theory. What if the Griffin family doesn't represent actual people, but immortal cartoon archetypes doomed to repeat the same patterns forever? This meta-theory pokes at the idea that Peter, Lois, and their children exist as eternal symbols rather than characters capable of growth, trapped in an endless cycle of comedic situations without the possibility of meaningful change or death. The immortal archetypes theory operates on a different level than other Family Guy fan theories. Instead of trying to explain the show's internal logic, it acknowledges that the Griffins exist primarily as vehicles for comedy rather than realistic characters. They represent timeless human types: the bumbling father, the long-suffering wife, the awkward teenager, the evil baby, the talking dog, that have appeared in stories throughout human history. In It Takes a Village Idiot and I Married One, we see Peter become mayor of Quahog through a series of absurd circumstances. The episode demonstrates how the show can place its characters in any situation without regard for realistic consequences or character development. Peter's brief political career has no lasting impact on his personality or the family's circumstances, suggesting these characters exist outside normal narrative progression. The archetypal nature becomes clear when examining how the show treats major life events. Peter can become mayor, start businesses, travel through time, or even die temporarily. But he always returns to his baseline persona as the crude, irresponsible father figure. This isn't character inconsistency. It's evidence that he represents an eternal comedic archetype rather than a developing individual. In Ratings Guy, the show's relationship with television and media becomes central to the plot, highlighting how the Griffins exist specifically to generate content. Their lives revolve around creating situations that can be broadcast and consumed, reinforcing their nature as entertainment constructs rather than autonomous beings. They exist to be watched, to generate ratings, to provide content for an endless media cycle. The theory suggests that each Griffin represents a fundamental human archetype that appears across cultures and throughout history. Peter embodies the fool, the character whose stupidity creates chaos, but also reveals uncomfortable truths about society. Lois represents the martyred mother figure, endlessly patient despite constant provocation. Meg serves as the scapegoat, absorbing the family's dysfunction. Chris is the innocent simpleton, Stewie the evil genius, and Brian the intellectual who thinks he's above his circumstances but remains trapped within them. These archetypes cannot truly die or change because they serve essential functions in human storytelling. The show can kill off characters temporarily, but they must return because their archetypal roles are permanent fixtures in our collective unconscious. They're not meant to grow or evolve. They're meant to repeatedly enact the same fundamental patterns that have entertained humans for millennia. The immortal nature explains the show's relationship with continuity and consequences. Major events get forgotten, character development gets reset, and impossible situations resolve themselves because these characters exist in a mythic space where normal rules don't apply. They're more like gods in ancient mythology, immortal beings who repeatedly act out the same kinds of stories for human observation and reflection. Their immortality isn't biological, but narrative. As long as humans need entertainment, as long as we recognize these fundamental character types, the Griffins will continue to exist and repeat their patterns. They cannot age meaningfully, cannot learn permanent lessons, and cannot escape their roles because they are those roles. The theory transforms Family Guy from a simple animated comedy into a modern mythology where immortal archetypes act out eternal human themes through contemporary scenarios. The show becomes a venue for exploring timeless patterns of human behavior through characters who exist specifically to embody those patterns forever. This interpretation suggests that Seth MacFarlane didn't create characters so much as he channeled archetypal energies that have existed throughout human storytelling. The Griffins are our latest version of eternal figures who help us process fundamental aspects of human nature through humor and repetition. And that wraps up our deep dive into the wildest Family Guy fan theories. We've explored everything from Peter's secret wealth and Brian's ghostly nature to the possibility that the entire show exists in someone's imagination. These theories demonstrate how creative fans can find hidden meanings and complex explanations even in a show that primarily exists to make us laugh. Whether you believe Stewie is actually the sanest Griffin, think Lois has been slowly poisoning Peter, or suspect that Mayor West understood the true nature of cartoon reality, these theories add fascinating layers to a show that's entertained audiences for over 2 decades. The beauty of fan theories is that they transform passive viewing into active engagement, turning every episode into potential evidence for elaborate conspiracies and hidden truths. Even if Seth MacFarlane never intended these interpretations, they show how meaningful stories can emerge from unexpected places. If you enjoyed this exploration of Family Guy's strangest theories, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into your favorite shows. Thanks for watching.